From the headquarters of Telesur English in Quito, Ecuador, I'm Carla Gonzalez, and this is From the South. On the day that Brazil swore its new far-right president, Jair Bolsonaro, the imprisoned former president, Luiz Inácio Lula da Silva, sent a letter saying that 2019 is the year of resistance and struggle. Lula said it's time to fight, to stop people being hurt by the new government's policies. He also said that they can arrest a person, but they cannot jail our ideas and our future.
Promover o bem geral do povo.
The presidential sash by the outgoing president, Michel Temer.
I pledge to defend and respect the Constitution, to observe the laws, to promote the general good of the Brazilian people, to defend the unity, integrity, and independence of Brazil.
Bolsonaro also said he would restore order in Brazil. He talked about family values, saying he will fight against the ideology of gender.
I take this solemn moment to call all deputies to help me in this mission of restoration and recovery of the homeland, by finally freeing it from the yoke of corruption, criminality, economic responsibility, and ideological submission.
Vamos unir o povo.
We will unite the people, value the family, respect religions and our Judeo-Christian traditions, fight the ideology of gender while preserving our values. Brazil will once again become a country free of ideological chains.
And the turnout of foreign leaders for Bolsonaro's swearing-in was down from previous ceremonies. Just 46 foreign delegations were present, and only 10 of these were led by heads of state or government. These included fellow right-wingers Benjamin Netanyahu of Israel and Viktor Orban of Hungary. For Lula da Silva's first inauguration, 120 foreign delegations attended, and 130 were there for Dilma Rousseff. U.S. President Donald Trump congratulated Bolsonaro on Twitter and praised his inauguration speech. "The USA is with you," he said. Bolsonaro replied that he appreciated Trump's encouragement and added, "Together we shall bring prosperity and progress to our peoples." As Bolsonaro was taking his oath, hundreds of people gathered outside the police headquarters in Curitiba, where Lula is being held. They threw balloons and flowers and demanded the release of the former president. Several leaders of the left-wing parties attended the gathering to reject Bolsonaro's inauguration. They said they are discussing strategies to fight against the rise of fascism in Brazil.
For me, Bolsonaro's inauguration means that the election was a farce. It was a fraud. They barred the candidate who was leading. And this was done by a justice system that is completely purchased.
This is a moment when we have to return to our origins. We have to strengthen our bases. It is a period of dialogue in which we have to explain to society what is happening. But more than anything, we have to stay united and strong.
Let's hear from our correspondent, Brian Meyer, who was in Curitiba that day.
I'm here in Curitiba, where at the stroke of 3 p.m. in front of the Federal Police Headquarters, where Luiz Inácio Lula da Silva is being held prisoner, hundreds of people launched red balloons and started chanting, "Free Lula, free Lula." And then the women in the group started throwing flowers over the police station gates. As you can hear now, it's very noisy, they're beginning to sing. But as the PT party has boycotted Jair Bolsonaro's inauguration in Brasilia, Curitiba, specifically in front of where Lula is being held prisoner, has become the focal point for the Brazilian left today.
Curitiba, Brian Meyer from Brazil. The leader of Brazil's landless workers' movement, João Pedro Stegile, says the new government will only attack workers and the most vulnerable.
What we will now have is a neo-fascist government that will apply an ultra-neoliberal plan. The makeup of the cabinet is very revealing. 1/3 military, another third evangelical pastors, and the other third trained in Chicago. So we cannot expect anything from them, except a plan to guarantee the profits of finance capital, foreign companies, and agribusiness.
And in other news, thousands turned out in Cuba on Tuesday to celebrate the 60th anniversary of the Cuban Revolution. The main event took place at the Santa Efigenia Cemetery in Santiago, where the leader of the revolution, Fidel Castro, is laid to rest. The former president and Secretary General of the Communist Party, Raúl Castro, said Cuba remained an example of independence and social justice, and he called for the release of Brazil's Lula.
Again, they're accusing Cuba, when it has been shown that foreign debt, the uncontrolled flow of migrants, the plunder of natural resources are the results of domination by transnational companies in our continent. The force of the truth has exposed those lies, and history has put the facts and those responsible for them in their proper place. The only thing that the Cuban Revolution and the epic story written by this people can be blamed for is the example it has given of total independence, victorious resistance, social justice, altruism, and internationalism. They managed to imprison Comrade Lula da Silva and removed his right to stand as the Workers' Party's candidate. To prevent his certain victory in the presidential election, I call on all honest political forces in the world to demand his freedom and an end to the legal persecution of the former presidents, Dilma Rousseff and Cristina Fernández de Kirchner.
Jamaica's ban on single-use plastic is now in force, and manufacturers, importers, and distributors have been advised to forbid single-use plastic bags and disposable plastic straws. The measure was recommended by the National Compliance and Regulatory Authority. The ban applies to plastic bags of 24 by 24 inches dimension. Retailers with small stocks of plastic bags can continue using them until their alternative packaging shipment arrives. The Dominican Republic has become a non-permanent member of the UN Security Council for the first time in its history. The membership was agreed on June 8 in the General Assembly. The Dominican Republic is replacing Bolivia and will take the presidency of the Council for 2019 and 2020. The country is taking one of the seats reserved for Latin America and Caribbean countries. We have more stories coming up. We'll be back. Welcome back. Citizens in Lima, Peru held a demonstration against the Attorney General's decision to dismiss two prosecutors who had headed investigations on Keiko Fujimori and Alan Garcia, expressing outrage at corruption.
I am outraged about how the majority of the population is losing these investigators, Domingo Perez and Rafael Vela, because of a decision taken by the prosecutor Chavarri, which strikes a strong blow against the fight against corruption.
Changing prosecutors a few days after signing the agreement with Odebrecht risks what has been agreed with them.
Meanwhile, Peruvian President Martín Vizcarra has slammed the country's top prosecutor for removing two key investigators in this Odebrecht corruption scandal. After hearing the news, Vizcarra cut short his trip in Brazil, where he was supposed to attend Bolsonaro's inauguration. He was reported as saying that he would return home to fight corruption and impunity. In a televised address, he confirmed he would present to Congress on Wednesday a motion for a state of emergency in the public prosecutor's office.
I urge the Congress to treat this matter with utmost urgency. As the case requires it, if it is not dealt with urgently, then we will put forward a confidence motion, because the fight against corruption is the #1 issue in the government.
And the now former members of the special team for the Lava Jato case say they will fight their removal from the case.
We are going to file an appeal against the illegal decision of the Attorney General of the nation as soon as we can, so that this decision may be reconsidered by the Board of Supreme Attorneys, in which he should not participate.
And the foundations the prosecutor of the nation has exposed in the resolution are fake. They do not conform to reality. On the contrary, they are intent to favor criminal organizations' interests that are subject of investigation by me.
Nicaragua has responded to the decision of the OAS Secretary General to promote the application of the Inter-American Democratic Charter. The move is being called unprecedented and illegal in a statement by the Foreign Affairs Minister. The application of the charter will allow the OAS Permanent Council to take, quote, necessary diplomatic initiatives in the event of a democratic rupture. The minister's letter appealed for the support of the OAS states to reject Luis Almagro's request, saying the document was intended to be applied while respecting the principles of non-intervention, sovereignty, and self-determination. U.S. border agents have fired tear gas and pepper spray at migrants trying to cross into the country at Tijuana. Columns of smoke rose over the border fence as migrants tried to make their way onto U.S. soil during the first hours of the new year. The recent deaths of 2 migrant children while in U.S. border custody have intensified criticism of President Donald Trump's immigration policies. It is 25 years since the Zapatista National Liberation Army appeared in Mexico. The indigenous organization shook the country and became one of Latin America's most important social movements. The group promotes the revolutionary ideals of land and liberty and has developed roots throughout Mexico.
The indigenous uprising, carefully prepared for more than 10 years in depths of southern Mexico, took the pre-government by surprise on January 1, 1994. 2 months after it first emerged, the Zapatista army began talks with the government.
We have come with truth and honesty. If there is another way of reaching this point, where this flag flies with democracy, freedom, and justice, show it to us.
With the betrayal of the San Andrés Agreements, in which the government promised to recognize indigenous autonomy and self-determination, the ECLN withdrew from the talks, but it pressed on with its agitation and propaganda until 2001. The Zapatista March ended with an appearance before Congress.
That is the country we want, where differences are respected, where living and thinking differently are not a reason to be sent to prison, persecuted, or killed.
While the Zapatistas continued to organize in autonomous communities, they made clear their distrust of elections through their other campaign.
The decomposition of the republic and its values is such that only radical measures can correct this, measures that do not appear in any government program.
The Zapatistas, through peaceful means, had a huge impact on Mexico, especially on civil society.
They showed the younger generation that it was worth struggling, that it was possible to change the course of history, which had not ended, that freedom was possible.
In the so-called shells, the Zapatistas gave an example of self-government and autonomy, open for all to visit and learn from, through the Zapatista schools. They also developed an organization to carry their ideals beyond the hills of Chiapas, the Indigenous Government Council, or CIG.
It's made up equally of men and women, and is present in all areas, carrying on the struggle against capitalist corporations.
It was out of the CIG that came Maria de Jesus Patricio. She is a traditional indigenous doctor and became a free candidate for the 2018 presidential election. She didn't get enough signatures to appear on the ballot, but she showed that the Zapatistas' principles remained relevant.
There is only one way to overthrow the capitalist system, and those who have seized everything, who have the money and the power, and that is organization. We see no other way. We have to begin to trust in what we have.
25 years after the San Cristobal uprising, the Zapatista and indigenous role in Mexican political life continues to inspire and educate the younger generations.
The number of people living in Honduras has increased since the re-election of Juan Orlando Hernández. Let's find out why.
The number of people who left Honduras had not changed until the re-election of Juan Orlando Hernández, a process marked by claims of electoral fraud.
This
is the cause of the current crisis. Now re-election is being debated, and people don't see this government as legitimate. We have to resolve these issues that have created crisis after crisis in the country.
The levels of violence and impunity increased in the country after the 2009 coup d'etat. Insecurity grew in neighborhoods and colonies, where the extortion carried out by the maras and gangs displaced thousands of people.
The crime continues because internal security was completely neglected. The fight against drug trafficking became a priority. because it was in the agenda of the US. Another problem is the corruption affecting both the national police, the military, and the entire judicial system.
Some corruption cases involving current government officials were left in impunity.
It is said that 5% of budgets is lost because of, and that of the size of the gross domestic product, and that can be equivalent to almost $1 billion annually.
Unemployment levels reflect the lack of opportunities for young people. Many who graduate from universities prefer to leave the country, since opportunities are limited to the informal jobs.
This is due to the fact that the current economic model is designed to employ cheap labor force and not specialized labor. The specialized labor is limited to very few, but most of the people who have studied face many difficulties.
Currently, Honduras is shaken by a political and social crisis. Several sectors are organizing an opposition force to pressure the current president to resign and to call for a transitional government.
In Colombia, 85 former FARC members have been killed since the peace agreement was signed 2 years ago, according to the United Nations. The UN Secretary General Antonio Guterres asked President Iván Duque to take more efficient actions to protect the former FARC members. The peace agreement was reached by the former armed group and the government in 2016, ending a 52-year conflict. And after this agreement, the country continues to face many of the same issues it did before 2016.
Over the past 2 years, Colombia has faced a grave humanitarian situation with the systematic killing of social leaders and human rights activists. This partly reflects the lack of governmental presence in the country's most remote regions, as well as the normalizing of violence.
This government has not embraced the peace process. It hasn't recognized it and has rather sought to undo it. This encourages violence by groups who do not care about a solution to the armed conflict. What's worse is that those who suffer this violence are people who have been left to fend for themselves by the government.
Indigenous organizations, as well as organizations which are working to substitute illegal crops, have been hit the hardest by the violence. For them, it's clear that these attacks are backed by economic and political interests.
We are seen as a nuisance, a hindrance to the control of the land. The easiest way to get rid of us and to generate fear is to massacre social leaders throughout the entire country.
The departments that have been the most affected so far are Antioquia, Cauca, and Nariño. Since the peace agreement was signed, close to the 500 social leaders and human rights activists have been murdered, a situation that has remained a low priority for the government.
As a special reporter, I have visited many countries in conflict, but Colombia is truly a particular dramatic case.
To this day, neither the Attorney General's office nor the Defense Ministry have been able to identify those responsible for the murders, despite the fact that these areas are heavily militarized. As a result, social movements have begun their own investigations.
96% of these killings in question were carried out with guns and ammunition that belong to the state, which is highly alarming, and we need to call out the government over these figures.
While these crimes are on the rise, Iván Duque's government continues to stigmatize social leaders and human rights activists, which only makes the situation worse. This, on top of a lack of interest by the government in dismantling right-wing paramilitary groups.
We're taking one last break, but stay with us.
By inequalities, abuse of power, and injustice. The American journalist Abby Martin covers the struggle for fundamental rights worldwide, deep into the search of files which uncover the empire's strategies through our screen and web platform in English. Empire Files with Abby Martin. Tuesday, only on Telesur.
Welcome back. A baby boy in Russia has been found alive beneath the rubble of an apartment block following a gas explosion that killed at least 7 people on Monday. The baby was found after 35 hours in freezing temperatures. The 11-month-old was diagnosed with a freezer burn and closed head injury. He's now being treated in a hospital and is reunited with his mother. The explosion was reportedly caused by a gas leak which damaged 48 apartments, and 36 people are still missing. Qatar has left the Organization of Petroleum Exporting Countries after 58 years as a member. The decision to withdraw was announced in early December. Qatar was boycotted by its Arab neighbors for 18 months after they accused it of being too close to Iran. However, the energy minister Saad Al-Kaabi said the decision to withdraw from OPEC was not political. Several buses in Bangladesh have been vandalized and set on fire after 2 female garment workers died in a bus accident. The police dispersed protests by angry garment workers after they burned 2 buses and damaged at least 30. The protesters are demanding that the bus driver responsible be punished for dangerous driving. In August, days of protest over road safety paralyzed the capital, Dhaka.
We took the driver to custody and he's now in the police station. We've spoken with the garment workers in an attempt to calm them. Obviously they were angry because they've lost 2 of their co-workers.
2 Indian women have entered a Hindu temple in the state of Kerala after it was closed to women of menstruating age. The ban was overturned by the Supreme Court, but protests against women entering continued. Earlier, millions of women, from government workers to students, took part in a rally to call for gender equality, as a number of women who tried to reach the temple were attacked by men opposing their presence. A man has been arrested for driving into pedestrians and injuring 4 people in a suspected racist attack in the German city of Bodrop. One of the victims is still being treated in a hospital. The driver continued driving and targeted another group of people, and then he was stopped by the police. According to police reports, the victims included Syrian and Afghan nationals. And with that, we come to the end of this news brief, but these and other stories, you can read them from our website at telesurenglish.net. And we are also on social media, so go ahead and follow us. For Telesur English, I'm Carla Gonzalez. Thank you for watching.